Is the universe itself conscious? This profound question has intrigued philosophers, scientists, and spiritual thinkers for generations. At first, the idea that the cosmos could have an inner life might sound far-fetched. After all, we usually think of consciousness as something that brains do. But in recent years, a fascinating discussion has re-emerged around the concept of a cosmic mind. Could consciousness be a fundamental feature of the universe, present even in the tiniest particles? The philosophical theory of panpsychism suggests exactly that. It's the view that mind or experience is a universal and ubiquitous aspect of reality. In other words, consciousness might not only exist in humans or animals, but could be an inherent quality of everything, perhaps even of the entire universe as a whole. In this video, we will delve into the question, is the universe conscious, through multiple lenses. We'll explain what panpsychism is and how it proposes that consciousness is everywhere, all the way down to the basic building blocks of matter. We'll explore philosophical theories including variants like Panpsychism, the idea of a universal or cosmic mind, and contrast them with traditional views that hold consciousness to emerge only in complex brains. We'll also look at scientific perspectives, from neuroscientists open to panpsychism, to physicists considering consciousness in quantum theory, and what empirical evidence or theories they offer. Finally, we'll discuss the spiritual and ethical implications of a conscious universe, how it resonates with ancient wisdom and what it means for our understanding of life, purpose, and our connection to the cosmos. Get ready to stretch your mind and consider a reality in which mind might be as fundamental as matter itself. Panpsychism, consciousness everywhere. Panpsychism is the philosophical idea that consciousness is a fundamental and ubiquitous feature of the world. The term comes from Greek, pan, all, and psyche, soul or mind, literally meaning mind in everything. This doesn't mean every rock or atom has a complex mind like ours, but rather that even the simplest entities have some form of proto-conscious experience, however rudimentary. In panpsychism, reality isn't split into dead matter and separate mind. Instead, mind is an intrinsic aspect of matter itself. This concept has a long history. Ancient thinkers like Plato and some pre-Socratic philosophers contemplated the idea of a world soul or psyche in all things. In the 17th century, philosopher Baruch Spinoza suggested that mind and matter are two aspects of the same substance, implying that everything has mental and physical attributes. Fast forward to modern times, panpsychism has found new supporters among philosophers of mind and even some scientists, as a possible solution to the vexing hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness, famously articulated by philosopher David Chalmers, asks, how and why do physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience, the feeling of seeing red, tasting bitter, etc.? Despite advances in neuroscience mapping brain activity, there's still no consensus on how consciousness emerges from non-conscious matter. Panpsychism offers a bold answer: perhaps consciousness doesn't emerge at all, perhaps it was there from the start. If consciousness, however minimal, is a fundamental property of the basic constituents of reality, like electrons and quarks, then as these form complex systems like brains, the consciousness may combine or integrate into the higher-level consciousness we experience. In this way, panpsychism flips the problem. Instead of trying to get mind from matter, it starts with mind everywhere. The advantage is that we no longer have to explain a magical jump from dead matter to living mind. The challenge, however, is explaining how tiny mind-like units combine to form the unified, rich consciousness we humans have. This is known as the combination problem, a key puzzle for panpsychists. In recent years, panpsychism has been taken increasingly seriously. A notable advocate is philosopher Philip Goff, who argued in his 2019 book Galileo's Error that modern science deliberately set aside consciousness to focus on quantifiable properties, and now needs to reincorporate it as fundamental. Goff and others organized academic workshops debating panpsychism as a viable framework for consciousness studies. David Chalmers himself has entertained a form of panpsychism, suggesting even a photon might have a tiny bit of consciousness or subjective feel. Prominent neuroscientist Christoph Koch also expressed openness to the idea. He wrote that if we accept consciousness as real and not tied to a specific brain substance, it is a simple step to conclude that the entire cosmos is suffused with sentience. In other words, Koch suggests consciousness could be substrate-independent, able to exist in many forms, not just biological brains. This has led him and others to consider that even simple systems, like a thermostat or a single cell, might have glimmers of experience, and that consciousness might extend down to the very fabric of reality. It's important to clarify that panpsychism doesn't imply human-like awareness in rocks or stars. Instead, it posits a continuum of consciousness. An atom might have an exceedingly primitive inner life, perhaps something as basic as a faint urge or a raw sensation. Terms are metaphorical since we cannot really imagine what it's like to be an atom. When atoms form molecules, and molecules form cells, those tiny experiences might combine or become more complex in some way, eventually leading to the rich inner world we know in ourselves. This idea is admittedly strange. Even panpsychists acknowledge the combination problem mentioned above. How do smaller conscious entities combine into a larger one without losing their individual subjectivity? Researchers are working on theories to address this. Despite the challenges, panpsychism's appeal lies in its potential to bridge the gap between mind and matter elegantly. It suggests that the difference between conscious beings and inanimate matter is one of degree, not kind. We're made of the same mind stuff as the rest of the universe, just organized in a special way. Panpsychism also comes in different flavors. Constitutive panpsychism. This is the basic version where fundamental particles have consciousness and complex minds are constituted by those particles. Human consciousness, for example, arises from countless tiny conscious entities making up our brains. Emergent panpsychism, a twist where while fundamental particles have proto-conscious properties, full consciousness might still emerge when they combine in the right way. This tries to respect the idea of combination but still sees a significant jump at higher complexity. Panpsychism, instead of saying fundamental particles are conscious, this variant suggests the universe as a whole is conscious first, and that individual consciousness, like ours, is derived from the universal consciousness. We'll explore this more in the next section, as it directly relates to the idea of a cosmic mind. Critics of panpsychism argue that it's speculative and not testable, a sort of philosophical punt that doesn't truly explain consciousness. Neuroscientist Anil Seth has quipped that panpsychism doesn't really explain anything because saying atoms have consciousness doesn't show how or why subjective experience exists. Others worry it's just relabeling ignorance. Consciousness is everywhere might just restate the mystery. Nonetheless, the fact that serious thinkers are debating it shows how perplexing consciousness is. Panpsychism may not yet provide all the answers, but it reframes the question in an adventurous way. It also aligns with some interpretations of quantum physics that hint at an observer-involved reality, or with approaches in neuroscience like integrated information theory (IT), which proposes a measure of consciousness, phi, present in any system with integrated information. Its creators, Tononi and Koch, explicitly state that their theory treats consciousness as an intrinsic property of reality and that even a simple particle could have a tiny degree of consciousness if it has any interaction or information capacity. This is essentially a scientifically inspired form of panpsychism. In summary, panpsychism dares to answer the question, what is consciousness, by saying, in some form, it's everywhere. This sets the stage for thinking about a conscious universe. If all components of the cosmos have a mental aspect, then at least in principle, the cosmos itself might have a mental aspect too. But is the whole more than the sum of its parts? That leads us to the idea of the cosmic mind. Philosophical theories, the cosmic mind, panpsychism. If panpsychism holds that every little thing has some consciousness, panpsychism flips the perspective to the largest scale. It's the view that the universe as a whole is one conscious entity. You can think of it as holistic panpsychism. Instead of countless separate consciousnesses in particles, panpsychism imagines a single, unifying consciousness, a cosmic mind, that underlies all of reality, with individual minds, like humans, being fragments or aspects of that cosmic consciousness. This concept has echoes in various spiritual and philosophical traditions, for example, the idea of an anima mundi or world soul in Platonism, or the Brahman in Vedanta, which we'll mention later. But in contemporary philosophy, panpsychism has been proposed as a serious theory to avoid the combination problem of panpsychism. If instead of billions of tiny minds adding up, reality started with one big mind, then the challenge becomes explaining how smaller, seemingly separate consciousness, like ours, emerge from that, a sort of decombination problem, which some argue might be easier to handle. To illustrate Panpsychism, imagine the universe is like a vast brain or a single organism, and each of us, and every conscious being, is like a neuron or cell within that greater mind. We have our individual perspectives, but we're also part of a larger consciousness that we're usually not directly aware of, just as a single blood cell doesn't see the full consciousness of the human whose body it's in. This is a metaphor, of course, but it captures the essence. The whole has an awareness that is more than just the sum of the parts. Philosopher Philip Goff, a proponent of Panpsychism, describes it this way: if we combine holism with Panpsychism, we get Panpsychism, the view that the universe is conscious, and that the consciousness of humans and animals is derived not from the consciousness of fundamental particles, but from the consciousness of the universe itself. In other words, our minds might be splinters of the cosmic mind, localized within our brains, yet rooted in a universal consciousness field. This sounds mystical, and indeed it blurs the line between philosophy and spirituality. But some argue Panpsychism can offer elegant explanations for puzzling things. For instance, in an Aeon essay, Goff even suggested a cosmic mind could account for the fine-tuning of the universe's physical constants. The universe's laws seem oddly calibrated to allow life, rather than invoking multiple universes or a creator. Panpsychism might say the universe chose those laws because it has a sort of will or preference for life. This is speculative and certainly not mainstream science, but it shows the kind of creative thinking Panpsychism encourages. In this view, during the very early moments of the cosmos, the cosmic mind could have influenced how physics turned out, aiming for value or complexity. This verges into a teleological or purposeful universe idea, which is controversial, but it's interesting that it's being discussed in philosophy forums. Apart from fine-tuning, the cosmic mind concept resonates with holistic interpretations of quantum mechanics or certain theories in which the universe is seen as an interconnected whole. Some physicists have pointed out that looking at the large-scale structure of the cosmos, galaxies and networks of galaxies, reveals patterns reminiscent of neural networks in brains, at least visually. This superficial similarity has spurred metaphorical comparisons suggesting the universe looks like a giant brain. While that doesn't prove anything about consciousness, it's a thought-provoking image, networks of galaxies like cosmic neurons. Additionally, theoretical physicist John Wheeler's famous saying "it from bit implied information is fundamental to physics." If one stretched that, one could ask if information processing at a cosmic scale could entail consciousness. Panpsychism versus Panpsychism, both are attempts to answer how consciousness fits into the universe. Panpsychism starts bottom-up, many tiny minds build bigger ones, whereas Panpsychism starts top-down, one big mind that manifests as many pieces. There's also idealism, another philosophical view, which outright says that consciousness is the primary substance of reality and the physical world is like an illusion or emergent from mind. Idealism is more radical, essentially saying only mind exists fundamentally. Panpsychism can be seen as a form of idealism, where that one mind, the cosmic one, is the fundamental reality. The cosmic mind idea often crosses into spiritual philosophy. It's akin to saying God is the universe, pantheism, or the universe has a soul. Yet, some philosophers try to discuss it in a secular, conceptual way, without invoking religious language, to see if it can solve problems in philosophy of mind. To sum up this section, the notion of a cosmic mind is a grand hypothesis that our universe may itself have conscious awareness, with our individual minds being integral parts of it rather than isolated anomalies. While traditional science has no evidence of a cosmic consciousness, these ideas push the boundaries of how we conceive mind and matter. They encourage exploration of big questions. Could the unity and order of the cosmos hint at a form of mind? Are we, as self-aware beings, actually localized focal points of a universal consciousness? Such questions border on metaphysics, but they drive at the heart of what consciousness might be if it's not confined to individual organisms. Whether one leans more to Panpsychism's mind in Atoms or Panpsychism's mind in whole universe, both perspectives invite us to view consciousness not as a latecomer in the cosmos, but as something potentially woven into its very fabric from the start. Scientific perspectives on a conscious universe. What do scientists say about all this? It's fair to note that most scientists remain cautious or skeptical about attributing consciousness to the universe at large. In mainstream neuroscience and physics, the prevailing assumption is that consciousness emerges from specific complexities, like brains, and there's no evidence that inert matter has any experience. However, a growing minority of respected scientists and thinkers are open to, or at least actively discussing, panpsychism and related ideas. Let's examine a few scientific angles. Neuroscience and Integrated Information Theory, IIT. As mentioned earlier, IIT, developed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi and advocated by Christoph Koch, is one of the leading scientific theories of consciousness. IIT proposes that consciousness corresponds to the capacity of a system to integrate information. In simple terms, a system that has many parts able to influence each other, integrate information, can generate consciousness. The degree of consciousness is measured by a value called phi. The theory astonishingly implies that not only brains have phi 0. A simple circuit, a swarm of neurons, even a photodiode has some minimal integration. Koch has stated that according to IIT, any object with a non-zero phi has at least a glimmer of consciousness. That could mean animals, plants, perhaps even atoms or fundamental particles might feel something in a very rudimentary way. While IIT doesn't say the universe as a whole is conscious, it would depend on calculating if the entire network of matter has an integrated phi that is higher than that of its parts, an open question. It establishes a scientifically framed panpsychist view. Consciousness is an intrinsic, fundamental aspect of physical systems. This is a remarkable convergence of cutting-edge neuroscience with ancient panpsychist intuition. IIT is being tested in labs, for example, using brain stimulation and measuring feedback to infer phi in different states, like wake vs sleep. Some researchers are even trying to see if they can apply IIT to simpler systems or computer networks. If one day we find consciousness markers beyond brains, it would bolster the idea that nature in general can be conscious. Quantum physics and consciousness. Quantum mechanics has long invited philosophical speculation. Some interpretations, like the observer effect where a quantum system isn't defined until measured by an observer, have made people wonder if consciousness plays a direct role in the fabric of reality. 1. Famous physicist, Sir Roger Penrose, proposed that quantum processes in microtubules of brain neurons might be key to consciousness, suggesting a physics-based approach where consciousness is tied to fundamental quantum laws. This isn't exactly panpsychism, but Penrose did consider consciousness a basic property of the universe, rooted in what he calls objective reduction of quantum states. Others, like physicist Bernard Heisch, conjured the idea that the vacuum of space, quantum fields in empty space, might produce consciousness and infuse it into matter when organized a certain way. These ideas remain speculative and not widely accepted, but they show attempts to scientifically model a pervasive consciousness field. Astrophysics and the conscious stars hypothesis. In a provocative 2017 paper, physicist Gregory Matloff suggested that stars might exhibit behaviors hinting at rudimentary consciousness. He observed an anomaly in stellar motions, Paranago's discontinuity, where cooler, more complex stars seem to move unexpectedly, and speculated that stars could be altering their trajectories intentionally by ejecting jets, essentially a star choosing how to move. Matloff called this a possible sign of a proto-consciousness field pervading space. It's a highly controversial idea and not confirmed, but interestingly, it's something that could be tested by analyzing star data. Are these motions consistent everywhere or vary regionally? If consciousness is intrinsic, maybe the effect is uniform. Matloff's hypothesis shows that at least a few scientists are willing to extend panpsychism to cosmic scales and look for observable phenomena that might hint at it. General systems and complexity theory. Some researchers in complexity science argue that new properties emerge at different scales of organization. A city, for example, might be said to have properties not found in individual humans, or a swarm of insects can behave like a superorganism. This raises the question, could the entire Earth, Gaia theory, have a form of consciousness? Or the solar system or galaxy? While speculative, thinking in terms of systems suggests that as complexity increases, so could integrative properties like awareness. There's ongoing work in artificial intelligence and computing to determine if consciousness could appear in sufficiently complex AI. If yes, that strengthens the notion that consciousness is an organizational property of matter and not limited to biology. Then the imagination leaps: the universe is the largest, most complex system of all, could it too have some emergent mind? Most would say we have zero evidence for that, but scientifically, it's a question one could pose: is there any global integration in the universe's structure akin to a brain's integration? Right now, physics doesn't describe anything like a nervous system for the universe, so this remains in the philosophical realm. It's worth noting the skeptical perspective, as many scientists argue that consciousness likely requires specific structures, like neurons, and evolutionary processes. They'd say, an electron having consciousness is as unnecessary an assumption as an electron having free will or emotions. It's adding a mysterious attribute without need. From a strict materialist viewpoint, unless panpsychism or Panpsychism make distinct predictions testable by experiment, they remain intriguing but unproven theories. So far, the science that leans that way, like IIT, is still being validated in its domain, brains, and hasn't leapt to proving a conscious universe. However, the dialogue between science and these ideas is growing. For example, in 2023 a workshop at Marist College gathered philosophers and scientists to debate panpsychism seriously. Physicists like Sean Carroll, an opponent at that meeting, argued that consciousness is emergent and doesn't require us to upend physics. Others like Lee Smolin attended, showing even cosmologists are listening in. The fact that Scientific American published an article titled "Is Consciousness Part of the Fabric of the Universe?" shows the topic has gained enough credibility to be discussed in scientific media. As science advances understanding of consciousness, still one of the greatest unanswered questions, it might either find ways to explain it within a materialist framework or discover phenomena that force a paradigm shift. If a paradigm shift occurs, panpsychism is one candidate on the table. In conclusion, while a conscious universe is not a scientific consensus by any stretch, it is a notion being explored at the fringes of scientific theory and interdisciplinary research. Whether through neural theories like IIT that inch toward panpsychism, or bold hypotheses about star consciousness, the question invites a creative interplay between empirical observation and philosophical interpretation. At the very least, it challenges science to broaden its conceptual toolkit for grappling with consciousness, that elusive phenomenon each of us experiences intimately, yet which remains tough to quantify or define in purely physical terms. Spiritual and ethical implications. The idea of a conscious universe doesn't only belong to academia, it also resonates deeply with spiritual and religious traditions around the world. If modern philosophers propose a cosmic mind, they are treading ground that mystics and sages have spoken about for ages, albeit in different terms. Let's explore some of these connections and the implications for how we see ourselves and treat the world. Ancient spiritual worldviews. Many indigenous and ancient cultures have held animistic beliefs that nature is alive and imbued with spirit. For example, in animism, every rock, river, or tree has its own spirit or consciousness. This is essentially a spiritual panpsychism. In Hindu philosophy, the concept of Brahman in the Upanishads is strikingly similar to Panpsychism. Brahman is described as the ultimate reality, eternal, conscious, irreducible, infinite, omnipresent, and the spiritual core of the universe. It is pure consciousness that underlies everything, and individual souls, Atman, are considered one with Brahman at the deepest level. The famous phrase, Atman is Brahman, means the self and the universe are one consciousness. Similarly, in some Buddhist and Taoist perspectives, the cosmos has an intrinsic mind-like nature. For instance, Mahayana Buddhism's Tathagatagarbha or Buddha nature doctrine implies a fundamental consciousness pervading all beings. These age-old ideas mirror what we call Panpsychism today. The difference is that spiritual traditions usually assert it based on meditation, revelation, or faith, whereas philosophers try to argue it logically. Nonetheless, there is a striking convergence. Mystics have long claimed consciousness is universal, and now some scientists and philosophers are entertaining that possibility. Pantheism and panentheism. Western philosophical theology has notions like pantheism, the idea that God is the universe, God and nature are identical, which effectively means the universe is conscious and divine. Baruch Spinoza was often considered a pantheist. He thought there is only one substance, which you could call God or nature, with infinite attributes including thought. Panentheism is a related idea. God is in everything and also beyond it. If someone says the universe is conscious, it can align with a pantheistic view, the universe equals God, conscious, or a panentheistic one, the universe is a part of God's consciousness. These views provide a spiritual interpretation of panpsychism, Panpsychism. Instead of just everything has mind, one could say everything is part of spirit. For someone holding these beliefs, modern panpsychist theories might seem like science catching up to spiritual truth. We are the universe experiencing itself. This popular saying, often attributed to figures like Alan Watts or Carl Sagan, though Sagan said we are a way for the cosmos to know itself, encapsulates the spiritual implication of a conscious universe. If the universe has a mind, then each of us, as conscious beings, could be a way that the universe experiences itself. Our consciousness is not isolated, it is a facet of the cosmic consciousness. This can be a profoundly moving idea. It means we are intimately connected to all that is. The boundaries between self and cosmos blur. In a spiritual sense, it encourages humility and unity. We are not separate from nature or the stars, we are one with them at the level of mind or spirit. Many who have mystical experiences report a feeling of oneness with everything, as if they touched the cosmic mind firsthand. Jung, whom we discussed earlier, might have seen that as an encounter with the collective unconscious or the archetype of the self, God image within. In spirituality, one might simply call it enlightenment or cosmic consciousness. Ethical implications. If one truly believes the universe is conscious, or everything has some degree of consciousness, it can lead to a more compassionate and reverent attitude toward the world. For instance, one might argue that if animals, plants, even rocks in some sense have an inner life, our moral consideration should expand. Indigenous traditions that respect the living spirit of the land reflect this ethic. You treat nature with respect because it's alive and aware in its own way. Even without going to inanimate objects, panpsychism softens the dividing line between humans and other creatures. It underlines a continuity. Humans don't possess a magical consciousness juice that appeared from nowhere. We are part of a continuum of mind that runs through the natural world. This perspective can foster environmental ethics, protect the earth as you would protect a conscious being, and empathy for other life forms. Is it so strange to think a tree might feel something akin to presence? Or that harming the ecosystem is, in a way, hurting a greater living system? Some people find the idea of universal consciousness as imbuing greater meaning and purpose in life. If the cosmos has a mind, perhaps our lives are threads in a grand cosmic story, rather than an accidental flicker in an indifferent void. It can be a comfort to those who fear that a materialist view of life is too cold. Panpsychism offers a universe that cares, at least insofar as it has experience alignment with meditation and inner exploration. Certain meditative experiences involve a dissolution of one's individual consciousness into a sense of unity with the universe. Advanced meditation practitioners sometimes report feeling a part of an infinite consciousness. If the panpsychist or Panpsychist view is true, one could speculate that in such states perhaps the mind is touching into that wider field of consciousness, beyond the individual brain. Again, this is more metaphysical interpretation than science, but it's interesting that what one person arrives at through logical reasoning, the universe might be conscious, another might claim to feel directly in altered states of consciousness. Of course, there are cautionary points. Simply believing the universe is conscious can become a kind of unfalsifiable dogma if one isn't careful. Throughout history, many spiritual beliefs were essentially panpsychist, everything has a soul, without evidence, and were eventually eclipsed by scientific understanding. We no longer think of magnetism as a sign of a metal soul, for example. The challenge is integrating these perspectives, respecting the subjective, existential import of a conscious universe, while pursuing objective evidence. For our personal lives, whether or not one literally thinks atoms are sentient, the notion encourages connection. It invites us to view ourselves as participants in a mindful cosmos, possibly fostering greater awe and responsibility. It also can alleviate existential loneliness. We might truly never be alone if we are always within a web of consciousness that is the universe. In a cosmic sense, one might interpret that the universe knows us because we are of it. Conclusion. The question, is the universe conscious, leads us on an exhilarating exploration that touches philosophy, science, and spirituality. We began by examining panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality present even in the smallest particles. This philosophical stance offers a daring solution to the hard problem of consciousness. If mind is everywhere, we don't have to magic it out of matter, but we do face the puzzle of how minds combine. We saw that panpsychism, once on the fringes, is gaining renewed attention and is even reflected in modern scientific theories like integrated information theory that treats consciousness as an intrinsic property of any information processing system. From electrons to ecosystems, panpsychism suggests the lights of awareness are never completely off in the universe. We then turn to the idea of a cosmic mind, or cosmopsychism, which posits that the universe might be conscious as a whole, with our individual consciousness being facets of that universal awareness. It's a mind-bending proposition that effectively paints the universe in the image of a giant brain or a deity immanent in creation. While purely theoretical at this point, it strikingly mirrors age-old spiritual teachings that proclaim the unity of our mind with the cosmos. Thou art that, as the Upanishads say, identifying the self with the universal Brahman. From a scientific perspective, we discussed how mainstream science is just beginning to grapple with these notions. There's healthy skepticism, but also a willingness by pioneers to ask if consciousness could be as fundamental as space, time, and energy. We heard of neuroscientists who dialogue with the Dalai Lama about panpsychism and find surprising common ground, of physicists like Roger Penrose and Gregory Matloff who stretch physics to include mind at large scales or in unusual places. No conclusive evidence yet points to a self-aware cosmos, but intriguingly, our best attempts to define consciousness scientifically do not rule out its presence beyond brains. The universe remains full of mysteries. Consciousness might be one woven through the fabric of reality itself. Finally, we explored the spiritual and ethical dimensions. If the universe is conscious, or all things have consciousness, it transforms our relationship with the world. Rather than seeing ourselves as isolated minds in a dead universe, we could see the cosmos as a living, experiencing presence, one in which we participate. This can inspire a sense of sacredness toward nature and our fellow creatures, aligning with traditions that have long treated all existence as imbued with spirit. It raises stimulating thoughts. Perhaps when we look up at the stars, there is some awareness looking back, or when we quiet our minds, we tap into a vast ocean of consciousness that connects us all. Even if these ideas remain unproven, contemplating them can expand our sense of wonder. We stand on an island of knowledge, surrounded by an ocean of the unknown, and among the deepest unknowns is the nature of consciousness. In wrapping up, does the universe know itself through us? Are we fragments of a cosmic mind trying to understand its own nature? Science may not yet be able to answer such questions, but the dialogue between our subjective inner explorations and objective outer investigations continues. Whether one leans scientific, philosophical, or spiritual, the inquiry itself is enriching. It reminds us that consciousness, that intimate sense of awareness each of us carries, is perhaps the strangest thing in the cosmos. And if one day we discover that indeed the lights are on everywhere, that the whole universe is aglow with the light of consciousness in countless forms, it would be a paradigm shift as profound as any in history. Until then, we remain curious, and in our curiosity, perhaps the universe through us remains curious about itself. The question, is the universe conscious, might not have a definitive answer today, but exploring it opens our minds to a universe of possibilities, where matter and mind, self and cosmos, are deeply interconnected. It invites us to approach reality not just with analysis, but with awe. And in that spirit of awe, we continue our journey of understanding, one conscious being amid a potentially conscious universe, asking questions that lead us ever closer to the heart of truth.